My name's Andy Junkin. I'm originally from Ontario, Canada. And the day I left for agriculture college, my mother, she shows me the farm financials, and we hadn't made money in over 10 years. And she says to me, if you don't fix these numbers, I'm going to leave your father. Now, I might be paid as a motivational speaker, but my mother, she's one heck of a motivational speaker. So I went off to agriculture college to save the family farm. And I also went there to find a wife because I'm from one of those towns where the only place you can meet girls is at the family reunion. So anyways, I went to college to find a wife, and I sat down with a university professor, and we wrote a 200-page business plan one-on-one together. And my dad had a look at it, he glanced at the cover, and just threw it straight in the fire. I wrote 18 separate business plans after that. And by the time I was in my graduating year of college, there was Tupperware containers up the ceiling. It looked like a scene from Hoarders, that TV show, full of information and research as to how to turn around our hillbilly farm. And we had a huge fight at Christmas, the graduating year. And my Uncle Claude, he says, well, why don't you just give the boy the field behind the barn? He could try out his ideas there. If they work, then we'll try them on the rest of the farm. If they don't, no big deal. So that's what we went and did. Now, just want to make a differentiation. I have a third cousin, Jimmy, who lives on the next concession. He was the one that was caught for marijuana behind the barn that summer. That was a totally different person. But my Uncle Claude, he came onto the farm, and it was August, and he walks through me looking at the crops. It wasn't marijuana, just to say that again. And he was really impressed with what was going on. And he comes in for dinner, and he slaps my dad on the back, and he says, your boy is going to make more money off an acre than you're going to make off the whole farm this year. And he just laughed. He thought it was a big joke. My dad did not think it was a big joke. And a couple days later, he plowed the crops under out of jealousy. And from that moment forward, we were seventh generation. 1832, the first white man killed in the back end of the township. That farm doesn't exist anymore. And I always wondered what would cause a man to plow down his own son's crops. What would cause a man to reject any suggestions for change when he was about to lose the farm and his family? And it comes down to this, and I think it happens on everybody's farm to some degree. Mine was a bit more extreme than others. And I think it's going to impact whether or not your family farm is going to be around in 10 years' time. So listen to this. When young lads come home from agriculture college, they got 1,001 ideas as to how to improve the operation, don't they? The first couple of ideas, mom and dad try to go along with those ideas, even if they are stupid. And believe me, if they're stupid, dad will be reminding the son 10 years down the road, won't he? But at some point in time, every suggestion for change is seen as criticism of what mom and dad have done in the past, right? Here mom and dad have spent their entire lives to give the farm to the kids on the silver platter, and here the kids are looking a gift horse in the mouth. They're trampling on that silver platter. And every suggestion for change is seen as a rejection of what mom and dad have done, so mom and dad shut down to any suggestions for change. And soon, the feelings are reversed. Every suggestion mom and dad have for change, the kids shut down. And soon, change is a dirty word on a farm. Now, I know I'm just talking about the neighbors, not about your operation, of course, right? But the logic used to be, you shut up. You go home to farm with your old man, and you'd follow in his footsteps and not say a damn thing until he was ready to retire. And back in the 60s, when Dad was 60, he'd have a bad hip, and he'd retire early. Well, nowadays, what's happening? We've never thought about the biggest change in farming technology. It's modern health sciences. When Dad's 60, he gets hip surgery. For 3 weeks, he's up on the couch, and he's on the cell phone yelling at everybody what to do. And then he's farming in his 80s or 90s, right? And I think that's fantastic. There's other health sciences that have come up. Viagra is my other succession planning seminar. Don't worry about that. So the thing is, we never really realized, most family farms, we got 2, if not 3 generations farming together. And because of the economies of scale that are required to farm, you got 2, 3 cousins farming together, or 2, 3 siblings farming together. And suddenly we got too many chiefs, not enough Indians, don't we? We got everybody butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And as a result, we get nowhere fast. We've got a crisis of leadership in agriculture we've never talked about. We just talk about the neighbors' cases, not our own. But it's really tough to make decisions on most farms. And as a result, 80% of decisions that should be made aren't getting made. And the decisions to not make a decision is a decision in itself. The third thing we never thought about is technology. I mean, it's a broken record how farming technology is changing. But man, the last 3 years, there's been some serious changes we haven't even thought about yet. You know, Wall Street, they poured billions of dollars over the last 20 years. We're just starting to see the implications of it. Today, the white elephant in the room is, I mean, GMO corn. How many guys out here planting with GMO corn have seen a little bit of a yield increase in the last couple of years because of GMO corn? Pretty substantial yield increase, right? What happens when you produce too much corn? Prices go down, right? It's impacted. Technology changes just hit everybody like a frying pan in the last 3 years, right? And you look at what's happened in the dairy industry. That's a good illustration right there, because it's going to happen across the Midwest and every other sector in a few years. Sex semen. I'm not talking about gay semen. That's a whole different topic. So sex semen is where you can predict the gender of progeny, right? So you can get semen vials, which says there's a 95% probability this is going to be a heifer calf, and you can put it into a heifer calf. And all of a sudden we have too many cows. You look at the dairy industry right now, they've got $13 milk. Last 3 years, guys have been losing money. And that's just the normal part of dairy farming. You know, they're used to the ups and downs. Well, what nobody has realized is we got a game-changing technology, and guys have been producing milk for $13, and their cost of production is around $15 to $18. And they've been losing money for 3 years. And it might not change for another 5 years. And all of a sudden, these guys are running out of money really quick. And they've been going to the barn milking cows every day, and they never once had a conversation with their partners about how to change the business model. They've never talked about how to drop the cost of production by 5%, let alone the 25% they have to. And all of a sudden, they only got 2 months left until they just completely run out of cash. And here's the key issue about the next farm crisis for us, guys. Here's the key issue. Back in the 80s, most guys were sole proprietors. Okay? One guy, he got bad news from the bank. He could go plow for the week, not talk to anybody. Just sit there and think his way through. Then he could drive into town when it rains on a Friday afternoon and go see everybody he needs to see and change the strategy of the farm for the next year to bail at the farm. Nowadays, we got a situation where you got 2, 3 business partners, and you can't make any decisions, let alone being able to figure out how to get yourself out of a huge bind. And as a result, 3 partners are not sitting down talking about how to change things. And we're just floating along like the Titanic heading towards an iceberg. And the decision to not make a decision is a decision in itself. My own farm, and you know, every family I walk onto has a problem with their business partners where everybody assumes that they're right and the other business partner is wrong. That was the situation at our farm. We were constantly butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. My mother, she pulled the ultimatum one day. She says to my dad, no more buying equipment. She had a different vision for the farm than my dad did. And she, what did she do? She said, no more buying equipment. My dad took off, went to the auction sale, came home with a manure spreader. And I guess you could say the crap hit the fan, and my parents got divorced. It's kind of a crappy story to tell, but what I've done with my life is turn the BS into fertilizer. For the last decade, I've been turning around family farm situations, whether it's dealing with the most dire farm succession cases or the most dire farm debt cases, it all comes down to the same issue. We suck at problem solving. We suck at being able to sit down and making decisions together with the family. If you can fix that issue, you can fix anything really quick. And the last decade, I've been putting on 80,000 miles a year, driving all over the place, saving family farms. And just actually moved, my wife and I married an American girl, met her on farmersonly.com. That's the only way to find a wife these days. And I'm from, like I said, I'm from one of those towns where I'm related to everybody, so I had to use technology for a reason. So anyways, we actually just moved to Solon, Iowa. And just because I'm tired of driving all over the country, and really happy to be here. I'll give you an example of a typical situation that I turned around. 5 years ago, when it was 2013, family called me. They were on the front cover of a magazine for being Farm Family of the Year. And I had seen that in February for their state. And then I got a call late in March from the daughter-in-law, and behind the barn is a whole different scenario. I'll just say, keep it like that. They're butting heads and pulling the farm different directions. And I talked to a few family members. It was a mess. But not every family member wanted me to come out to the farm because they were concerned that they were going to be judged. So I got a call in June, and it was the 10th of June, and it was 11:30 at night. And what had happened was they went to buy the farm next door. Okay, and they already bought 2 farms that year. And then the farm right across the road came up for sale, and they couldn't let that go. So they were a bit stretched financially, but they went to the bank. The bankers thought it wasn't going to be a big problem, but he had to go through an audit, right? So they had to go through a third-party audit. So they went and did that. The banker and his boss came out to the farm one day, and it was raining like it is today, so they hadn't even got their beans planted. So the thing is, we got the banker came out to the farm, and he said, not only am I not going to give you the loan to buy the farm across the road, we're going to take the whole operation in a year's time, unless you guys get your stuff together. And what had happened was, 5 years before, Grandpa had died. And they did a whole complicated succession strategy with a big city accounting firm. And they had 3 different corporations. And it was so complicated, nobody understood it. Mom thought that she understood it, but she didn't. And they had spent too much money trying to avoid capital gains with the rise of the corn and bean prices. And it was an honest mistake that anybody in this room could have made. But it looked fraudulent to the bank. And so all of a sudden they were in a situation that nobody wants to be in. And what happened that night was, has anybody here ever talked to a family member when they're driving their truck on the side country road and there's no traffic and you just kind of drive up and stop? You ever done that? So the father and the son were talking to each other, and like I said, the father says, "Give me your hand. Give me your hand." And he dropped a shotgun shell into his son's hand. It's a true story, guys. And he says, "If you don't fix this mess you boys created, I almost used that myself an hour ago. I'm going to do it." He drove off. That's how I got introduced to that family. So I drove all night so I could be there. And it turned out that their cost production was $200 an acre in the loss at $7 corn. Right? Like I said, they spent 3 times as much as they should have on capital gains. Mom made a mistake. And the young lad says, "Well, how the hell does the bank expect us to drop our cost production down to $320 in a year?" And I should just say that when you're in moments like this, I think the best way to turn the situation around is to use the Alcoholic Anonymous prayer. I'm not saying you should be an alcoholic to farm, though some would say different. But the thing is that the Alcoholic Anonymous prayer, it says, "God give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Within my own farming operation, our cost of production for our beef, I mean, our cost of production was $1.20. For a pound of beef on our operation. And we were getting paid 83 cents on the market for about 5 years on average, the day I left for college. Now, my dad, he had me going around. We went to all the politicians and told them how they should be subsidizing beef. My dad spent a lot of time complaining about American corn prices and how American farm subsidies were causing all his problems. It's kind of funny. But, you know, he went and blamed everybody else but himself. And he had me going door to door, dressed like this, pretty much, like a Jehovah's Witness to all the vegetarians' homes in town, trying to convert them to beef. Swear to God. My grade 10 English teacher hated me. And, you know, the thing is that you can spend a lot of time wasted in a situation where you're denying the truth. But the absolute truth for our operation was we had to get our cost of production down to 83 cents. Right? And the problem I had when I went home to farm is I told my dad what to do. Anybody here could go to our farm back home in Canada and come up with many changes you can make. But the thing is, you got to first of all get everybody online with the need to change. And until you come up with the truth, an absolute truth that everybody buys into, you're not going to get any real changes in place on the farm at all. And the young lad, as I said, he says, how does a bank expect us to get our cost of production down to $3.30? And we were in the shop, and it was, you want to talk about heated argument? They got into blaming each other for this and that and the other thing. And I said to the young lad, the bank doesn't care if you get your cost of production down to $3.30 or not. You've got a year to turn around your situation, or else you're not going to be farming. Nobody cares if you farm or not. And I could tell him that because we lost our farm. And when you got up every morning and done chores, it's pretty hard to imagine that barn being empty. It's a truth I hope nobody in this room ever has to live. So they got into arguing and complaining about their situation. And I got up from mediating the situation, and I just got up and grabbed a can of spray paint, and I put this. And then the brother just grabbed my back of my shoulder, and he was just about to drive me. He says, "What the heck are you doing to my shop?" I said, "This ain't your shop anymore. It's the bank's. You got a year to turn this situation around, or else it's going to be the bank's permanently." And he almost drove me again. And then you could see the light go on in his head. And what we did with that family, there is no more dickering or arguing about what happened in the past. I set the rules down. And from that moment forward, there's no more blaming each other for what's happened in the past. It was talking about what can we do going forward to turn the situation around. And I said, we're not going to sit down and solve the problems today. We're going to wait 3 months. In the next 12 weeks, we're going to sit down once a week, and each guy comes to the table with one idea. We did it over Skype, so I could meet with them. Each guy comes to the table with one idea as to how to improve farm profit by $3,000 without spending $1,000. And if you come to a meeting and you don't have an idea that's solid, you have to burn $20 out of your wallet. And you know, everybody came to the table at each meeting. You know, everything from GPS, like they had a data card that sat in their GPS of their combine. They had never downloaded the damn thing, right? There's a lot of farms like that. I'm not going to get you guys to raise your hands right now, but there's a lot of farms that went and bought a GPS unit for the purpose of using variable rate fertilizer that didn't fall through on it. There's money slipping between the cracks on every operation, even if the neighbor thinks that you guys are awesome. We all know behind the barn there's a whole different situation going on. And then there was, we did simple changes like their marketing program. We made simple changes like adjusting their getting them to agree on their corn planter, how to set it up. That was a 25-minute argument about how to set up a corn planter. And it was heated, right? It had nothing to do with the corn planter. It came down to the egos between the different family members. We had to get rid of that BS first before we could sit down and talk about real changes on the farm. And in 12 weeks, the 3 partners came up with 36 ideas. 7 weren't no good. And they had to learn how to reject change without rejecting the person that came up with the idea. That was a huge thing for that family, in order for them to be able to brainstorm together as a team. But what we did was the 29 ideas that were good actually result in $300,000 in improved profitability. That was a minor thing. The bigger thing is we could sit down for an afternoon and have some real conversation without egos being involved. So I drove out there again for that afternoon meeting, and we had to make some really hard decisions. They had to sell a farm. The dream property mom and dad had developed into a nice house with a nice pond. They had to sell it. That was pretty tough to do. But they had to go from a mentality of me to we. Everybody had to do what was good for the farm and for the family. The kids had to go get off-farm jobs. Everybody had to surrender their egos, right? And, that family, they're farming today. We were able to get it down within a year and a half. We were able to get down to that price. And they're bulletproof. If you can drop your cost production by half the way they did, they're still able to, their cost production is unbelievable today. And more importantly, that family, their Christmas is 10 times better. Their egos have gone out the window. They're actually a real family. And, some folks say that I'm a doomsdayer. I think every generation we lose 50% of family farms. I fear that the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to go through that with our generation. But I'm excited about that too. Because the families that survive and go through this walk-through fire experience are going to be 10 times better. Because what we have to do is evolve from pretending to be a perfect farm family to actually becoming the farm family we pretend to be. Right? You give me, a lot of folks think that economies of scale is a determining factor as a competitive advantage. You give me a farm that is worth, let's say, $40 million in their assets. You give me a family that's worth $10 million in their assets. The $40 million family, they don't talk to each other. They're always butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. You give me a family that's only worth $10 million, but instead of butting heads, they figure out how to be able to sit down, make good decisions together, and work towards the same goals. Who do you think is going to be around in 10 years' time? Whose Christmas do you want to be around at? Not only does this process of drop down the cost of production dramatically, you get rid of all that BS you guys don't want to deal with. And farming actually becomes fun again. These hippies in California, they say that the family farm is dead. I would just say that we're just getting started. I believe that this is the first generation where we actually have a family farm. 30 years ago, one person owned everything, and he was a dictator. Now we might have our assets in a corporation or a partnership, but you own shares, right? And I think the key word is shares. Our generation has to learn how to share. In order to take over grandma's farm and pass it over to your great-grandchildren, you got to apply the principles of what grandma taught you when she was babysitting you in the back sandbox of the farm when you're working with when you learn how to play with your siblings and your cousins. And whoever applies these principles and evolves who they are, they're going to be happier and they're going to be successful. And you think about the pioneers that came over and settled this land. It's been this way every generation. Every generation, 50% of family farms fail. But the thing is, when the pioneers came, they had an overwhelming obstacle. You imagine just being dropped off in the prairie and given a few tools and said, clear this land, make this happen? It would be overwhelming. What are we crying about having to drop our cost of production by 10, 20%? And bigger thing is, the guys that came over from Europe, a lot of guys went back. They couldn't hack it. But that's because they weren't willing to evolve who they were. We, as individuals, each generation has to evolve who we are. And for us, we have to turn working with family from a weakness into a strength. And I believe that anything you can do to improve the quality of how you make decisions together as a family, learning how to problem solve and identifying that's actually a real problem and actually having a conversation about how to turn around your problem solving skills. That's going to determine whether it's your family's name on your farm's mailbox in 30 years' time. Thank you.